Good afternoon and welcome to an Independence Day special edition on i24 News. Today, the State of Israel marks 68 years of existence, and we will dedicate the next hour to exploring the current state of the country from various aspects. In this broadcast, we'll look at Israeli society, politics, and security, as well as the country's economy and culture, and of course, Israel's image abroad. But before we start, let's cross now live to the Tel Aviv promenade, where our reporter Anna Ehrenheim is standing by for us as the Independence Day party and activities are taking place. Anna, it's always a lively event at the Tel Aviv celebration site. Your update on the festivities in the city this afternoon.
It's a beautiful day. It was a beautiful flyby, and I'm here with the Katz family that came from an hour south in the desert. It's their first flyby here in front of Tel Aviv. So how did you find it?
Well, we were originally planning to go to an Air Force base, but they wouldn't let anybody else in. So then we heard about it here, and we went here, and then we saw the planes coming.
Did you like it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was fun?
Yep.
Would you come back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. So you can see that it's an amazing time here. It's a beautiful day. There are tons of people here, families, old people, tourists. Everyone is here and having an amazing time. And it's going to continue until the end of the night. People are going to be partying all over the country. So back to you, Ayman.
Yes, Anna, we see the flyby here from our studios as well. Thank you for joining us from Tel Aviv. We might get back to you later in the show. And as you mentioned, Anna, Israeli Independence Day is one of the most eventful days on the Israeli calendar. But before the festivities begin, Israelis commemorate those lost in the many wars for the state's survival. i24 News correspondent Tamara Ziv takes a look at the transition Israelis make each year from mourning to celebrations.
1948. It's a year firmly etched in the minds of all Israelis and Jews around the world. That year, on May 14th, the country's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, declared Israel's independence, realizing the Zionist dream of a Jewish state in the Holy Land. Celebrations and dancing ensued across the country, and hours later, the British Mandate of Palestine was officially ended. But just hours after that, the new state found itself fighting for its existence in a war waged by its Arab neighbours, known to Israelis as the War of Independence. Since then, every year, Israelis experience a similar journey between extreme emotions of sadness and elation. They remember the fallen in the War of 1948 and the victims of all the wars and terror attacks that followed, before celebrating Independence Day. This stark and swift transition between grief to joy, as Remembrance Day morphs into Independence Day, is a difficult one to make, particularly for the many who have lost friends and family over the course of Israel's 68 troubled years of existence. That juxtaposition will be felt no less this year, months after the launch of the so-called knife intifada, which has claimed dozens of lives. Some choose to close their doors as the festivities begin, trying to drown out the sound of fireworks, which only serve to remind them of the explosions that took the lives of their loved ones. Others embrace the hope that follows the pain and look to brighter, more peaceful days where no more lives will be lost for the sake of their nation.
Yes, and with me now in studio to discuss these many aspects of the connection between Memorial Day and Independence Day are Toby Boni Shamir from Beit Tefilah Israeli. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. And Amir Oren, senior analyst for Haaretz. Good afternoon, Amir.
Good afternoon, Ayman.
Toby, let me start with you. This connection between the Day of Independence today and yesterday, Memorial Day, is one that many find jarring. And there has been discussion in Israeli society before about separating the two. Where would you say you stand on that?
Well, I think it could be a good idea, but there is so much relevance to this difficult transition because part of our celebration, and like in life where joy and sorrow are always mixed, it's perhaps an artificial separation. So we at Beit Tefilah felt that that people need help in doing that. And like we do it with many of the holidays, we take the traditional ceremonies available to us from our Jewish heritage, and we update them. Part of the relevancy of Judaism and its ability to update itself, and we crafted a ceremony to help in this difficult transition. It was very, very moving. I've been already to 3 ceremonies. People from abroad sit in the audience and they cry. We make the transition from sadness through texts and through songs, and within the framework of the phrase from Ecclesiastes, a time to mourn and a time to rejoice, a time to dance. And at the very moment, at the juncture, when we're making the transition from sadness to joy, we have the children march in with Havdalah candles. So we take the Havdalah ceremony, which is always used for the transition between the Sabbath, the sanctity of the Sabbath, and the mundane daily routine of every day. And we've transitioned it in a way that marks the transition from the sanctity of mourning to the sanctity of the celebration. And it was very moving. There were 300 people at Beit Tefilah America yesterday. People sit in the audience and they cry, and then they burst out in dancing afterwards, because the ceremony helps them contain and navigate it. And that's one of our aims at Beit Tefilah, to form new ceremonies, Jewish Israeli ceremonies, that are relevant to many, many people in Israel.
And Amir, do we need more time between mourn and rejoice?
You know, looking at the beautiful sea and beach, one is reminded of another Independence Day parade which took place exactly here 44 years ago, but also paratroopers jumped from Israeli Defense Forces, Israeli Air Forces planes into the sea here. It was even more enjoyable. Now, obviously, grief and joy are always intertwined. And David Ben-Gurion, upon hearing of the United Nations General Assembly voting for the creation of Israel, as well as for the creation of Palestine, on November the 29th, 1947, wrote in his diary, "So many people have spontaneously filled the streets dancing with joy, but I, who know what price we are going to pay," he meant in the War of Independence, the 1948 war, "I did not join with them because my heart was filled with sorrow and concern and anticipation." Now, there is a case for separating the two, but there is something which is similar, almost identical to both dates, and this is the personal and national stock-taking, which should take place. Perhaps the best way is to find another date for the day preceding Independence Day, for Memorial Day, and I would suggest putting it the day before Election Day. Because if Israelis do their stock-taking the night before they go to the polls, perhaps there won't be so many people whose memory we will have to grieve on in later years.
Toby, what do you think of this idea?
Well, I'm sure that it's a good idea to take stock-taking. I don't know about the juxtaposition to an election, but I think that this gap between mourning and between celebration, it was very well handled yesterday, and it does induce people to take stock-taking, because both those in the audience who had lost their loved ones, and even those who had not lost a loved one in a war, somehow something in the ceremony, whether it's the grieving part or the celebration part or the transition between them, helps people navigate this really overwhelming sea of emotion.
And it's something that we have to do as Israelis every year, Jews, Arabs alike. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Toby Boni Shamir. This was a pleasure. Amir Oren, you're of course staying with me for this next segment. Thank you again, Toby, for being with us today.